Welcome to this month's Ops Talk, sponsored by Rentley. Really excited to have you all joining us. This week, we're really excited to have co-founder of a company. I've known him for about, 8 to 9 years now. He's been in the PropTech space, growing a fantastic company with really strong branding and growth in both the single-family and multifamily arenas. Hopefully, today you'll learn a little bit about his struggles with growing a company and also his success story as well. We're hoping you're going to learn a lot from this guest. I was actually, Googling a little bit before about some of the growth metrics, and this company has one of its platforms has 3.5 million units and captured more than 400 million photos. And they've been around since 2011. So for those of you familiar with PropTech, the old joke we say is it's like dog years. So this guy has been around an industry for quite some time. It's my pleasure to introduce Jindou Lee, co-founder and CEO of HappyCo. Jindou, welcome to Ops Talks. Really happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then the numbers I think are like 4.5 million units.
Okay.
Yeah, photos. I think it's like close to 800 or 900 million photos in that database.
I do not want to pay your AWS server bill.
No. Yeah, but yeah, to your point, like it's taken a long time, right? Like it takes a long time to do anything remotely decent in the PropTech industry. But I always say we were young when we started this, and both you and I, and we just look older every time I see you. So we're just go with that. So,
well, again, that's like dog years, right? You multiply by 7 on the vendor side. So it's really great having you. I was kind of joking before we were filming. Jindou's been in the space so long. And he's very close with our co-founders, Barrick and Clark. And I think, early days, you guys were running around doing trade shows and kind of calling each other when you needed to be somewhere. So no, it's great having you on. It's really fantastic. I wanted to, when we were sort of talking about this before, explain to the audience how you've grown a company. Like you said, really to truly grow something great, it takes time, right? So I was hoping we could talk about your journey pre-HappyCo, right? Learn a little bit about your pre-HappyCo life. It's like BCAD, right? Like BC, pre-HappyCo, and then how that transformed into HappyCo. So I guess let's start out. Where are you at now, by the way? I know you hop around a lot.
No, I'm in Irvine, California. Yeah, I do hop around a little bit, but I am permanently based in Irvine, California. And I think during COVID, we were stuck in Australia. That's where I'm from. I think we were stuck there because of the US consulates were closed, a bunch of stuff. And so I took a lot of calls from Australia for like 4 or 5 months. And for some reason, everyone who sees me is like, "Hey, you're in Australia, right?" I'm like, no, that was just like.
Well, I remember you were traveling a lot. I remember, so that's fantastic. Tell us what started your journey towards HappyCo.
Yeah, I mean, we can go pretty far back, but essentially, like my education was in graphic design, and we always joke like, the Asian prophecy of being a doctor, a lawyer, maybe an engineer, accountant. I didn't fulfill any of those prophecies, and I kind of went to the dark side of the world and decided to do graphic design, which, as I think Asian parents are like, "Oh, cool, that's a hobby. One day, he will do something else." Unfortunately, I stuck with graphic design, and then my first few jobs were working in the video gaming industry.
Oh, really?
I was working on the UI and UX for a bunch of video games. The one that you'll probably know is Mortal Kombat. So I worked on some of the Mortal Kombat titles. Mortal Kombat versus Shaolin Monks was the one that I worked on. I was running one of the UI teams, and they kind of sent me there to finish it off. And then I worked on like Gauntlet Legends, NBA Ballers, Blitz the League. A bunch of like different, it was Midway games. So Midway was who I worked for.
By the way, huge presence in the arcade industry in the 90s. I remember Midway was everywhere. So you touched a lot of those games, and you were designing and UXing a lot of those.
Yes. Yeah. So my role was to build the interface. So if the start screen, the home screen, anything that's in the game, there's like the health bar and all that kind of stuff. Me and when I say me, my team and I was working on making that a reality. And it was really fun. It was really fun times. Because I grew up playing a lot of it. Like I think I had every single console out there. I was an only child, so my parents were like, "Hey, enjoy yourself. Here's a
Right.
console.
Here's
play
a
it."
console instead
Yeah.
of a babysitter. Genesis or N64?
I really like the Genesis.
Me
I don't
too.
know.
I'm a
It was
Genesis
fun
guy.
times. Yeah, so it was a really unique time growing up in hindsight, because that's when consoles first came out, and then you had the personal computer. But back in the days, you had to build your own computer, right? You buy the 286 motherboard, and then you go, "Oh, I need a sound blaster," and so I just like put together computers. It was super fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed that era.
So you started in graphic design. You had a passion for personal computing. By the way, I remember having to shop for video cards. Like you had to get a 3DFX, the Voodoo.
Yeah.
Those are really fun times, and I appreciate those times because they teach you a lot about building and constructing and technology. And now looking back, I feel like that sort of drove my passion to work in software. And I'm guessing you found a similar parallel. I mean, you founded a software company. I have to think those were part of building blocks that contributed to that.
I think so too, because I mean, in hindsight, they were just the things you did, right? And then back then, the modem came out, the bulletin boards before the real internet came out.
Yeah, the AOL, CompuServes of the world.
Right? Yeah, and I think like all those things, I just had a deep passion for digital, anything that was digital. And so when I graduated graphic design, most of my peers would be creating logos and packaging and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I just want to build websites. I want to build like DVDs, CDs, like things like really geeky stuff. So I kind of like found my way into video gaming. But video gaming was it was super fun because you had to build something that someone else could use, and you can't be in their living room to teach them how to use that thing you just built.
Right.
You had to really dumb down the experience that someone was engaging with on your video game. And I think that just taught me so much of like, it's intuitive if you're a video gaming nerd, but how that applies to building software is that I think it's intuitive. And I'm like, I look at some stuff and I'm like, why is the onboarding so bad?
That's a really important point. I never thought about that. Like the best software applications and best video games are the ones that you can adopt quickly and easily without really needing instruction, right? Like I think some of the most complex games that ended up being the most fun for me I think Half-Life, right, was a great example. Half-Life, you did not need a manual. You needed to know, here's 5-10 buttons that you're just going to learn to use. The onboarding was literally a practice level. That was part of the experience. You started
shooting.
Exactly. And so you learned it bit by bit, and it was progressing you to learn more complex things, and it's embedded in the experience. And it didn't feel like you were onboarding. It just felt like part of the game. It just felt natural. Yeah. And now that you say that, it makes sense. And I'll come back to this later, but this makes me understand, one of the things that really sticks out to me about HappyCo is, number one, it's functionality in your platforms, right? I've seen your company demos and I'm like, oh, wow, they did a really good job of XYZ. And then the other thing that really resonates when I go to trade shows is I always tell my marketing team, I'm like, look how HappyCo does their branding. I remember that your booths and your branding and your just even the kerning in your font, like the small things all are so tightly knit and well done. And I have to think that comes from your video game and UX background. I mean, those are at the forefront of how you think about product.
Yeah, and I think that like it's kind of weird because they come in a way like natural, because I've had other folks say, oh, your design's really good. How do you find the designers? And I'm like, oh, it's like when you look at someone's work, you can just tell. And then they're like, oh, actually, it's intuitive. Yeah, and, other founders have, some are very engineering heavy and focused, and their products are like amazingly engineeringly built, and I think some are like sales driven founders who can crush the sales cycle really quickly. But so I think, it really shows up in the company, the output of the company, what the DNA of the founders are. So it was fun time. It was really amazing for me to just go through that process.
So what was the inflection point where you're like, gosh, I need to start a company to solve this problem?
So I never really wanted to, like my parents were like blue collar, they never really they didn't even finish primary school, I don't think. So like I never really had the ambition to be a founder or like start a business, so to speak. But I remember in my graphic design jobs that I took along the way, I always felt as a designer, I wasn't using the full part of my brain. I was using only like the creative side, but not the business, like problem solving side. Man, there were probably about 12 businesses or things, probably a bit more, that I started from like when I was in college all the way up to starting HappyCo. Like in between, those were 12 things. Like a lot of them failed. Some of them had some success. But what actually happened was I started a web agency. So I was building websites for people. This is early mid 2000s. Yeah, I would build websites and I sold that business in 2008 or 7 or 8. Small company, and I made a little bit of money, but very tiny amounts. And then I started, trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. My dad was like, "Hey, you should go buy real estate. Get off your bum and go do real estate." I'm like, "Oh, okay, thank you, Dad."
Thank you for the sage.
Yeah.
Go be a doctor or go get into real estate or go be a lawyer. Do something. Yeah. Don't worry. That's every parent should know. My parents are wondering why I'm not a doctor yet. So anyway, yeah.
So I started buying real estate. I bought a single family home in Australia. So this is all in Australia. So I started buying single family homes, and then I did some like remodeling, just tiny bits and stuff. And within 3 months, 4 months of I sold it, the market boomed, and I made, I don't know, 50, 60,000 bucks, 3 months. And that was like double my salary at the time, and I'm like, holy crap, like this is a really fun thing to do. And, I really love real estate because it's so tangible, and that's where like people create memories. And so I remember saying to myself, oh man, I love real estate. I need to do more of this. So I started buying, the profits rolled in. I started buying more properties. And then in 2010, I started buying in the US because Australia has no positive cash flow properties. The average house is probably, oh man, these days it's probably about $700,000 Australian. This is my guess now. Because I'm not in the market that active now, but like $700,000, you get a mortgage for 20% down. So you're getting like call it $560,000 mortgage. The rent doesn't cover, or just the best case, it just covers that, but it mostly doesn't cover. So you're always not getting positive cash flow.
So the rental market is not, the prices aren't driven as high as here in the US. They're pretty nominal.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but I was doing a bunch of these. I was buying some, then I was flipping some. And then I'm like, I would like cash flow because I wanted to help at that stage, my dad to retire from his day job. I'm like, he's worked really hard. He's, he's a blue collar worker. So I remember like investing in Memphis and Cleveland, and I was getting 25, 30% cash on cash returns, which was phenomenal. But I was kind of capped by the amount of capital I had. So I do a deal here, finish it up, invest the profit. But took a while. If I knew there was this whole thing where you could raise $1 billion from investors at that stage, I would have done that and done.
You would have been a REIT. Yeah,
I did a REIT. Yeah. Oh my god! So I didn't know that. So what actually ended up happening was a few years later, I had a little bit of cash to help my dad retire. And I told him, "Hey, Dad, you can kind of work less or retire." And he's like, "And then do what?" I'm like, "Oh crap!" So I forgot the first rule of customer service, which is you need to ask the customer what they want. Right? That'll probably play into how I think about work these days. Like, I could probably retire, but then it's like, and then do what? And so I think it's interesting how parents influence your life in very subtle ways. So anyway, the long story short is I started investing in the US on these positive cash flow properties. I had property managers that would manage these properties. And I just kept getting like really shitty emails from them saying, "Hey, there's all these damages in the property. We didn't document the before and after condition. So you need to give us more money to go fix this." And I'm like, "Well, why don't you just, can't you get the deposit back from the resident?" And then they would come up with like, "Oh, we didn't take the photos, or we took the photos, but it was lost. It was in someone's digital camera." This is 2011 now, 2000. Yeah. And I'm like, "Don't you have software? Isn't there like something called software?" And they showed me the software they were using. it's like probably like the more archaic, like property management systems in the space. And I was like, no, this is not the software you use. This is the 70s, 80s, right? And they're like, no, this is it. And so I remember just going, okay, why don't you use an app? Right? The iPhone was out. It was still thought of as like a gimmick or a fun thing or a work thing. People were still using Blackberries. And then the iPad 1 came out, and I'm like, okay, the form factor is big enough so someone could use an iPad. So, so I made some screenshots on an iPad 1. I rang 20 companies, and I'm like, 20 property management companies. And I said, yeah, well, this is a cool idea to make an inspection app. Do you want it? Every single person I spoke to was like, come in and show me. This is in Australia. 2 of them actually in the US. So I visited 20 companies, showed them the app, the screenshots, and 19 of them signed up to basically use the software.
Wow.
Which we had no software.
That's incredible. Wait, you got 19 out of 20 to sign up just based on a screenshot.
Yes.
That's a fantastic ratio based on a screenshot.
It is, right? And to me, that was like really weird. I'm like, oh, and everyone kept saying, oh my gosh, our inspectors are going to be so happy. Our owners are going to be so happy. And the word happy kept coming up. And so the first version of the company and the product was called Happy Inspector.
I remember.
Right? We had an app to do inspections. So that's how it all came to fruition.
So that's why it's called Happy Inspector.
Yes.
At the initial, I always wondered that. And then it transformed into HappyCo because obviously you guys expanded your services, but that's phenomenal. 19 out of 20. And so that's incredible and shows that there was a real pain point that needed to be solved, right? I feel like that's something people may struggle with when starting their companies is they're trying to ram a solution down and no one's adopting it. We talk about this in another Ops Talk episode where there's a common theme of people having to fail a couple times or even pivot a few times when they're starting up. But yours sounds like you had a home run out the gate.
I say it like it's smooth sailing, but there were so many learning lessons. And I think what was the special sauce was I would go in and I would show the screenshots. Right. And as I'm showing them, I'm asking the customer things like, hey, is this even useful? And they're like, oh my God, yes. I'm like, which part of it? And they're like, oh, the ability to just take photos on your iPad. That's so amazing. I'm like, oh, cool. And what else? Oh, I don't have to go back to my desk to, take that, transcribe it into some Word document, copy that, send. And so I think what I was doing is I was actually learning what to say and refining it after each conversation. So by the time, the earlier ones were a little bit sketchy, like, come back and see me again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And then pricing, I was like, how much would you pay for this? And no one had a frame of reference because there's, nothing was out there. So I learned I was like, how much do you pay today for whatever you're doing? Well, we have to get cloud storage. That's X amount. We have to physically print these out. This is back in the days. We have to print it out and then send it. And it's postage, printing, blah, 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 blah. So I just came up with a random number. I'm like, would you want to pay $50 a month? And SaaS was just becoming popular. And they're like, yeah, $50 a month sounds great for unlimited inspections. So that was our first product.
How long did it take to go from that initial, you had the 20 screenshots to a working product?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate to have my co-founder with me. He's the technical guy. He was working for another video gaming company at that stage. Previously, he worked for me, my web development company that I built. So I was like, hey, do you want to build this at night? He goes, sure. So after his day job, he basically helped to work on this. It took us about 3 to 4 months to get a very rough version out. Mm-hmm. And I remember we took that first version, went back to those customers and hey, here's the thing that you're going to use.
Right.
And I remember following, I was in the field watching how they would use this product because I was interested to learn as well. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was this one guy, he was a technician, maintenance guy, whatever he is. I shook his hand and I kid you not, I felt like a little child shaking a massive adult's hand. He had a massive hand. And so I was like, holy crap, and he couldn't tap the image, he couldn't tap the buttons. They were too small. And I'm like, we need to make the buttons bigger and easier. So like that process really helped us to make the first very usable inspection tool. If you look at 2012, 13, if you look search inspection apps before then, they all look really horrible. Then anything after 2014, 15, a lot of the inspection apps started to copy the Happy Inspector style, like the buttons look bigger. So it was just interesting, like, that body of work helped us to really make a product that was usable.
Right. And that shows, I mean, a pretty interesting value of remaining customer centric.
Yeah.
Right. It's like those small little things that you integrate into the product to make a happier customer. Right. I know it's harder as the company grows bigger.
Yeah.
How do you maintain your customer centricity? How do you know, or how does your team kind of make sure that features like the buttons being bigger, and like how do you do that as you get bigger? Because it's easy when you're two people and you have 20 clients, right?
It's challenging, but I think it's like one of those things. What I've learned is, and some of the challenges and mistakes I've learned was, I'm like, this is how everyone builds product, and you realize, like, not really. Like, some people, they don't. So we still do this today. Like, I still talk to customers. I go visit customers. Last year I think I visited like over 100 customers in person, just seeing what they do, talking to them. I think that's one way. I'm listening to every single call we have with customers and prospects.
It's incredible.
Well, I say every single, I'm probably doing less now because it's impossible. And then when it comes to designing, I expect like the designers and the product people to do the same. Like, great, you've built this. Have you shown someone?
Yeah.
Have you sat down with the customer? Right. And I think just pushing that a lot of times, after the fifth time, if I'm still asking, have you shown this to a customer? And they say no, I'm like, okay, you should do that tomorrow, or you should go find another company that doesn't require you to talk to customers.
Yeah, I think that's important too. Like, always ensuring that you're somehow engaging with the customers, but also pushing your team to it. That's a great value to instill. And I asked it, remembering at your conference, you guys had this promo video, and the first thing you mentioned was this came from hundreds of visits with clients. You've obviously seen a lot of success. Tell us about maybe one of the first struggles that you had to overcome at HappyCo, or one of the first blockers that maybe the audience can benefit from learning from.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of any obstacles that we've ever really...
Everything's great.
Yeah, it's
perfect.
No, there's some, oh my God, where do I start? Like, I was listening to a podcast recently, and it's from a book, and essentially, like, the whole point about business is you have to find problems. If there's no problems, it means there's no business.
Right.
Like, you have to be a magnet to problems. Every time you see a problem, you have to address it. There's so many I can think of. Let me think. What would be a good one? Is the one that I can think of that, outside of the customer facing stuff where you have to keep, talking to customers. The one area which I think is the biggest challenge is, people. Like, people that you bring on and hire. I think what happens is, like, it's very easy to lower the bar and not have difficult conversations. I still keep trying to get better at it, but not having tough conversations, difficult conversations, is where a lot of companies start becoming average. And then eventually, the challenge is when you become average as a company, you basically die. Like, this average doesn't get you a pass, it gets you a fail. So having difficult conversations is probably like the thing that I've worked the most. And earlier in my career, I didn't want to have those conversations because I was afraid, or I put them off. And then I've had relationships that have broken down because I've never had that conversation. It kept going on. The customer was pissed off. Eventually, that person was annoyed because I didn't want to look them in the eye anymore because I was so upset with them performance. And then just became like a really shitty place to work, and then become a bad environment for us. So, that's the one thing I try to keep working on. If I'm unhappy about something, I need to voice it. I need to, like, act upon it. Yeah, that's the one thing I can think of.
Yeah, I would say you said a couple things that resonated with me, but that is definitely the one I think, especially as you grow operations like accounting, it's very like pass or no pass, right? It's very binary. So almost sometimes we can be radical or avoidant to a fault. So it's been, and this is something I constantly coach myself on, is approaching the subject directly but passionately, like come passionately, I should say, right? If you've ever read, actually, you would really like this book. It sort of talks about this. It's Beyond Entrepreneurship by Jim Collins. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
Yeah.
But oh, you have? Okay, yeah. And it talks about people strategy. Your people are the most important asset. I think that's where Merrick does a better job than I do. I'll be radically transparent on that one. He is much better at that sort of aspect of management. But you're right. Like as you grow, it's something that you can't avoid, and it's important to growth. The other thing that you said that resonated with me, and it sort of reminded me, but I didn't want to interrupt your flow. It was a really good story. Was you were mentioning the pitch, and crafting the pitch.
Yeah.
And I remember, our smart home division wasn't always called Rentley Smart Home. It was called Rentley Keyless. And I remember a couple of years back, product managers would be like, why did we call it that? And I'm like, well, I'll tell you exactly why. We'd call people. This was in 2015, by the way. We'd call people and we'd say, hey, like we have this really interesting smart home solution. And I'd get this like deer in the headlights look of what the heck's a smart home? And I'd get a hang up like within 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. I go, gosh, man, this isn't working out well. Merrick and Clark are not going to be happy. And I realized when I was pitching that I wasn't solving a problem. They'd be like, smart home, it just sounds whiz-bangy. And like I was making all these calls, and every time I was kind of like tweaking things a little bit. Yeah. And that's when I led with keyless. I said, hey, this is Rentley Keyless calling. They're like, oh, keyless, like without keys. And I'm like, yeah, blah, blah. And then I'd go into sort of the value prop of the product. Yeah. And it sounds silly now, but that's really important for starting something, like really crafting the messaging and the product to address those pain points in that customer base so that it resonates. Because had it been an alternative universe, both of us could have just stuck with the script and completely crashed and burned. But it's really important to kind of pick up on that. You need to be, have that empathy, and it's this weird thing you have to do when you're pitching, to also be empathetic and see how people are reacting to it and tailor on the fly.
It's almost like you need to be empathetic, humble, but also be like smart as well. And you know what I mean? Like, yeah, because I think I've seen folks who are like, no, this is the pitch. And
right.
They're very empathetic people. This is the pitch. And they're like, they're maybe too arrogant to kind of go, maybe my pitch is wrong. I could improve on it. And then, I would give feedback or whatever it is. And they're like, no. That yours is wrong. And I'm like, I'm not saying that. I'm not telling you your pitch is wrong. I'm telling you your customers are saying your pitch is wrong. Right. Like, that's the big difference. Is like, I'm not your buyer. You know what I mean? Like your buyer is the customer. I think that's a really, if you're starting like a new product service company, like that is the number one thing that you have to sell. Because I imagine if you're starting something new, your product is not even there, or not even 5% of the what you need to be building. And if you're building more than 5% of the product to then pitch, you're like building too much.
Right.
You shouldn't be building until you get the pitch right. And then people go, I want this. Then you go build.
Yeah.
That's the whole, yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's easy to burn through a lot of cash if you don't follow that advice. You can build a lot and not sell anything, and where'd your money go? And that could happen at a lot of scales too, by the way. That doesn't just apply to startups, right? That could be a Series B, Series C, Series D. Like, look, we've been in the space a long time. You see it happen. And I think it speaks to the earlier point of you, again, I use the dog years joke, but it's true, right? Like you see, I remember I made this comment in another podcast. I remember going to a trade show, and I asked someone, I said, hey, what would it take for you to consider us as a partner? And they said, stick around for 5 years. And I was like, man, that's a pretty brutal comment to make. But I get it now, because you just see, and this, everywhere. It's like, if you've been doing this for how long that you've been doing it, it's like, you're going to be around a while, which shows a lot to the customer and how you've, really grown a company.
Yeah. One thing I think people forget is real estate is a long-term game. Real estate is not like if you're selling to marketing teams, it's like the average tenure is like 2 years of a marketing person, whatever. But real estate is, the person that has been in this industry probably like 20 to 30 year tenure. Like, right, they play long-term games. Like if you think about when they buy an asset, it's not a 1 year, it's actually a 5 to 7, minimum 5 to 7 year hold,
Right.
before they can actually realize their capital and cash and benefits. So
100%.
I really like that because I didn't want to go and sell the company and then had to build something else and be like, hey, remember me? Like I gave you a product and I left. I sold it to someone who didn't really care about it. And
Yeah.
they shut it down. I want to sell you something else. Like I
Right.
want to be the guy where people are like, hey, you made me a lot of money in the past and you're still doing it and you're coming up with new things to help you make more money. Like I want to work with you guys. Like, so and I've got no better ideas than I love real estate. I love technology. I love business. Like this is what I like to do.
That's awesome. I'm curious to know too, like obviously your company is known for leveraging technology to streamline innovation and streamline operations, right? So how do you balance, especially with maintenance technology, how do you balance innovation with practicality with the needs of the multifamily, right? It's easy to come up with ideas that might apply, but you want to make sure that the client adopts it, right? So like, how do you balance that?
Think of all the different people within the ecosystem. So you have your maintenance person, maintenance supervisor, you have the property manager, the regional manager, the asset manager's boss, the owner, right? And then you have to kind of think of all those people and the third party managers, they have one that usually some stuff. So I think about like, you have a hypothesis, you have to go test it with every single person in that food chain. And every person will be looking to solve something different. And what's in it for me? So the maintenance guy is, dude, I just want to close tickets, finish on time, go home, hang out with family. If you want me to do paperwork, gosh, I hate paperwork. Like I'm here to just use these fingers to fix stuff, And so like your tool has to be so easy for them to use and has to save them time and headache so they don't get in trouble by their supervisor's boss or whatever. On the other end of the spectrum is the owner. All they care about is like, is this gonna like make me money, save me money? Like how, right? So when we build things, we have to think about every single person on that food chain. The regional manager is, I want to look good in front of my owners because I'm servicing their properties. What story can I tell to, hey, we're using HappyCo, it's a maintenance product. It's going to increase our technician from 1 to 100 to 1 to 175. Like what that means is we're going to drive down costs by 30% on payroll, blah, 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 blah. And the third party manager, what are they trying to do? Increase management and unit doors. So they're trying to find the one tool that they can standardize across their whole company, get more doors, go to pitch prospective owners and be like, we're the best because we work with HappyCo, best in class and really affordable compared to all the competitors out there. You get the best, you get the cheapest, it's so good. They look really good. So I think in my mind, we have to think about all those players and then build benefits and actually execute on the outcome that makes those guys all happy.
And I would say that's probably, I feel like real estate, our vertical is quite sophisticated in the sense that, to your point, you have to satisfy a lot of different stakeholders and really ensure that they're bought in, design the product around it, and sell accordingly. Right? And those are really hard things to do. You're servicing 10 stakeholders. You have owners, managers, and I assume you tend to target the ownership groups, or is it the third party management?
We do both. Like we actually, the way we think about it is like we target anyone that has over 2,000 units, 1,000, 2,000 units.
Either under ownership or management.
It doesn't matter because the value prop, that's why I think like you have to think about the ownership group, right? If you can have a benefit to the owner, then it doesn't matter who you target because ultimately the owner pays. Each person along the way thinks of different things, but the owner is where it's coming out of. And I always think about how do we drive our cost of our software down to zero? How do we make it closer and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper? Because conventional wisdom is you want to charge more and more and more and more as a vendor. But like, what if you could charge less and less and less and less? Then I think that's that's aligned with our customers and what they want. And I think B, it's like, if we can do that, then we've built a really interesting business that's the opposite of everyone else that's trying to build a business in this industry. They just want to have more costs, charge, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit, learn about you, the person outside of work. I mean, what are some of your passions? Like
Probably the like family, that's a given. Like for me, like soccer,
kids?
I've got 2 kids. I've got
Two
a
kids.
7 and a 1-year-old.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's right. I remember seeing your 1-year-old recently.
Yeah.
Keeps you busy.
He's big, 98 percentile. No, it's fun. Like family, besides family, like soccer is probably like a big thing.
Right.
Growing up, I, played a lot of soccer. A lot of my thoughts and patterns and how I think about things relate to soccer. Building the team. How do you
Right.
how do you coach a team? How do you work with a team? And I, when I was young, I got to play semi-professionally, which, you got paid, but not enough to play professionally. So that's my one regret is not being a professional soccer player.
You wanted to go pro.
Yeah, oh my God, I'll be so good.
Well, so I knew of that about you. And like, even at the trade shows, you're like, hey, we're getting a soccer get together. And I'm smart enough to know I'm not falling for that trick. This guy almost went pro. What stopped you from going pro?
Just injuries, and I think injuries. I just didn't have growing up in Australia. It's kind of like growing up in the US. Like the MLS and Australian League is it's okay, but we're so far from Europe and all the big leagues, right? And I think, I had some people that I know. They grew up in the Netherlands, and they're like, oh yeah, I live 5 kilometers or 3 miles from Ajax, which is one of the biggest soccer teams there.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, cool. And another guy's like, yeah, I live near Feyenoord, and it's a local team's Feyenoord. And I'm like, oh, cool. And those were their local teams, right? And so their local team is amazing. My local team is it's different. I think that yeah. And if I was probably on the reasons, and injuries got in the way as well. And it just wasn't good enough.
And you said you applied some principles in soccer to building a business, right? I mean,
Yeah.
There's a lot of parallels, I assume.
Yeah. So the team I played for, one of the teams I played for, we won a few championships together. We finished top of the league, and our team wasn't even what I gleaned from it was our team wasn't very good. Individually, we weren't very good, but what we did have was a system that we played to, and everyone knew their role, and everyone was working towards it. And then we kind of had this mantra that we would never lose a game at our home stadium, and it was just really weird. We had this conversation at the beginning of the season, everyone was aligned, and we never lost the game at our home team.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah. And I think the parallels is in the company, everyone needs to know what we're working towards, right? Being very, clarity is kindness. We need to know what are we working towards. It needs to be something a little bit bigger than us, a little bit bigger, but not too big that it's a fluffy goal. And then communicating it to everyone in the organization, every single opportunity, right? At soccer, every game, before every game, this is our home. We never lose, right? This is our castle, we used to call it, whatever it was. It was very gimmicky, but it worked. And I think once you have alignment, that goes a much further way than having the best individuals. It's about working together and having alignment.
That's awesome. Do you guys have a company North Star that you guys always track and kind of speak to?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have a company North Star. We speak to it. Where we're having challenges at the moment is that being remote. So you don't have that FaceTime. So how do you? And then new people joining. So how do you keep having that conversation?
Are you all completely remote? Are you 100% remote?
Completely remote, except for our Australia. We have a small team in Australia. They're in office, but hybrid.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm ops, so a lot of us are in office, and
yeah,
I think one of the things which has its own challenges too, right? Because I feel like remote work you can it's a bit easier to recruit for, right? Because obviously, it opens up a lot of prospects to apply to your job. But I think one of the trade-offs for having in-person is you get to have a lot of collaborative in-person, what I'll call magic moments, where it builds culture, but also you can kind of do on-the-fly problem solving. By the way, it's there's always this, in-person versus remote. I mean, I think it just really depends on your company culture and role. A lot of our operational work, we have a logistics team. It's like, it's not like you could do that remote. It's like you have to ship stuff, right? But I do enjoy those sort of magic moments that are unscripted, unscheduled, and you either have a laugh together or you problem solve. I remember we had a meeting scheduled for ops, and we're sort of, our culture is Google Meet, right? You send out a Google Meet, soon out a Google Meet. So I get on the call, it's like 5 or 6 of us. And I get on the call and like, we're all in the same office. And I go, we're about to kick off the call. And I'm like, hey guys, like, could we do this in person? And everyone's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, we're all here. Why are we getting on a Google Meet? Let's just go in the conference room. But it's so funny. It's like, that's the era we live in now. Or I'm like, yeah, let's meet in person. And I think that drives a lot of culture and innovation.
A lot of culture is like seeing what other people do, right? Like, and if you don't see how they do, how they act with each other, how do you really experience culture? It's like going to Europe or any country, or like Italy, Greece. Culture, you can talk about as much as you want. Oh, Greece, it's, the Greeks love arguing about random stuff. You're like, oh, sure. Until you go, I grew up with Greeks, I can speak Greek, but until you experience it, then you go, oh, they love arguing because it's part of their, I don't know, maybe it's their, philosophy. But
do you guys try to work in person? Do you have like quarterly or semi-annual or times where you get together?
We do. So we try to, like, we have our sales kickoff next week for this quarter. There'll be NMHC, the PropTech. There's a bunch of events. We have our customer summit. Depending on the year, we do our company retreats. So there is a little bit of that, but it's still the small doses. Back in the days, we were in the same office. And
yeah, that's right. You have a company retreat. Let me know next time you have one, please.
Yeah.
Merritt Clark,
we don't know where.
We need a company retreat.
We don't know when. We'll do one.
Last year, we were both at NMHC Annual. I think we caught each other on the airport on the way out, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we did. Mm-hmm.
I remember I was scarfing down this burger, and you're like, hey, Andre. And I was like, oh, yeah, because it was such a busy show. But I do remember the Apartment Strategies Conference at NMHC, which is fantastic. The mantra was, stay alive until 2025, right? That was the mantra. Interest rates weren't projected to really decline that much. The industry didn't feel like there was a lot of growth, but there was a positive outlook in that, hey, if you stay alive until 2025, that's all you need to do. And I'm curious, like, what are you seeing in the industry with regards to 2025, and what's your and HappyCo's mantra going into 2025?
Yeah, for the industry, I don't think much is going to change. In fact, I think it's going to be challenging. And I look at it from like the ownership side. Property prices are not going to come down. Or let me caveat that a little bit. I don't think there's people are like, oh, the prices will come down. But there's so much capital on the sideline waiting and ready to be deployed, which will push the price of deals up. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges with people underwriting to it's not even the new norm, the norm that was before the good times. Your high interest rates, your low cap rates, like that's just going to continue to happen. And so really, if you were an owner trying to buy more stuff, there aren't that many good deals out there. And the good deals, like a couple of years ago, the buzzword was off-market deals. Like, wow, that's an off-market deal. Well, what actually happened was the off-market deals they tend to have more people more interested, so the prices went up anyway.
Sure.
So I think you're going to see the same, but you'll see a lot of one-off deals that under a lot of the stress where the banks are not flexible and like working the existing owners. I think there'll be some good deals like that, but it won't be a lot of them. So from an acquisition transaction, I think it'll be challenging. The existing folks have to figure out how to operate in the current environment, which there isn't a lot of give, and like it's just gonna be really challenging. Which is what I think.
So is it thrive through 2025 or survive through 2025? Make sure you survive through 2025.
I think thriving will look like what it is today. If you can keep what you're doing today going and still make some money, that's thriving. I don't think thriving won't be the great times party. I think just the fact that you're doing well and making cash flow, that is thriving. I think people have to readjust to that fact. And which means the operators have to convince their owners, like, this is good times.
Yeah.
This is the good time. So I think
Yeah.
that will be a really big thing this year.
Jindou, you get a minute to pitch whatever you want. What's new at HappyCo? What's new with you?
Yeah, so for HappyCo, like in light of what I was just saying, HappyCo is what we're thinking about is like, how do we allow our customers to execute on that strategy consistently? So the tools that we provide them, it needs to solve all those problems. We want our customers to spend less. So we're building more and more, like we're expanding our product offering around maintenance. So if you want to lower your cost of maintenance, you want to drive efficiencies, we will have everything for you. The counter is you have to go to buy from 6 or 7 different startups, or some startups or companies that tell you they have things, but they don't really have it. We want to have everything under one roof. We have launched a plugin marketplace, which, we have some partners on.
Like Rentley.
Like Rentley. And the idea is that we see like we want to give our customers a world where they can use all these different best-in-class tools under one roof, be more efficient, and just run and execute consistently. So if you're looking to solve maintenance, if you want to even chat about maintenance, we will be there and we'll help you through those challenges.
Awesome, man. Well, I really do thank you for being a part of this. It's really appreciated. I know how busy you are, so having you on is incredible.
Anytime, anything for you.
Thank you so much. And that's a wrap for this Ops Talks. Jindou, thank you so much. Really appreciate you all watching this, and don't forget to like, subscribe. This is Ops Talks by Rentley, and I'll see you next time. And Jindou, thank you so much again.